For number 5, it says in the triangle below, sine of angle x is 0.6. What is cosine of y? So it's important to remember that we have a complements rule, a rule of complements, which says sine of an angle will be equal to cosine of its complement. Remember, complementary angles are angles that add up to 90. If I know that I have a triangle that equals 180 degrees, all the angles added up is 180. That's the triangle sum theorem. And I know that one of those angles is 90. I can do 180 minus 90 to see that these two angles need to add up to 90 somehow. Because we know that they need to add up to 90, that means that they are going to be complementary angles. Angles that add up to 90 are complementary. So the answer to this is going to be 0.6. Another way that we can keep track of that is if I'm looking at angle x and it's talking about sine. Sine is, let's bring this down so we can see it. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if I go opposite, that's this one, and this is the hypotenuse. Then it says cosine of y. So if I'm now looking at this angle instead, pretending none of that orange stuff exists, and I'm dealing with cosine, that's adjacent and hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is still the hypotenuse, but the side that's adjacent to y is actually this side here. So for the sine of x, that will be this side over the hypotenuse. The cosine of y will also be this side over the hypotenuse. So that means that they must be the same. So cosine of y equals 0.6. You can either remember the complements rule or you can sketch it out on your paper. So for number 6, it says in right triangle XYZ, angle x and angle y are complementary angles. So that means those angles add up to be 90 degrees. So I'm going to draw a little sketch so I can make sure I can visualize what I'm saying. X and y are complementary angles. That means they need to add up to be 90 degrees rather than be 90 degrees, which is what z is. It says the value of sine of x. So if I were to put a theta here, that means this is the angle we're talking about, is 35 over 37. It says what is the cosine value for y? So if we're doing sine of x, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that means opposite is 35 and the hypotenuse is 37. This question is also dealing with the rule of complements because now we're looking for cosine of y. So I'll say this is alpha. So cosine of alpha, cosine is always going to be adjacent and hypotenuse. This is my adjacent side, this is my hypotenuse. So cosine of y is adjacent over the hypotenuse. So again, if you know the rule of complements and you know that you have a triangle, sine of one angle will be equal to cosine of the other. But you could also sketch out a picture so you can try to see it well yourself as well. Number 7 is also going to be a rule of complements. And it says, in a given right triangle, let cosine of theta be 2/5. So what is sine of 90 minus theta? And if you think about this, if we have theta, and we add 90 minus theta, so I add this angle and this angle, theta minus theta, those cancel each other out, and we're just left with 90. So really, them telling me 90 minus theta and theta lets me know that I'm dealing with complementary angles. So I could also draw this out if I wanted to. But since they're complementary angles, I know since one is cosine and one is sine, the answer will be 2/5. They basically give it to me. But that's okay. I'll go ahead and draw my picture just in case to make sure I'm correct. If I put theta right here, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means this is adjacent, this is hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is across from that right angle, so that's 5. Adjacent will be 2. Now if I'm doing 90 minus theta, that means I'm now looking at this angle here. for my sine value, I'll put it in orange so we can make sure we know what we're talking about. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, which will also be 2/5.